Hi, my name is Paul Biondich. I'm a physician and a geek and interested in the intersection of technology and healthcare. I work at LifeOmic as the Director of Wellness Programs.
It's so great to be here. My name is Marisa. I'm a certified Primal health coach, and I teach intermittent fasting in the LifeOmic community. And in my course called Intermittent Fasting Freedom, I also host a podcast called The Foundation of Wellness.
The most common form of intermittent fasting is something called time-restricted feeding. And basically, someone will restrict their window of eating to a particular time of the day. And as some people advance that, they move to things like alternate day fasting or all different kinds of programs that are all focused around time restriction, but it's a big catchphrase and it includes a lot. One of the most common things that people think about with intermittent fasting is weight loss, and certainly there are a number of people that experience weight loss, but something that people might not realize is that the process of going into intermittent fasting is a form of metabolic switching. And what I mean by that is when we eat food, when we digest it, we end up using glucose from that food as a form of energy. And intermittent fasting allows a window of time where someone can move from using glucose as a form of energy to using your body's fat as a form of energy. And that switching, that metabolic switching that happens, it usually takes between 8 and 12 hours. There's a whole lot of benefits that are associated with that. And that's the really exciting part of intermittent fasting. It goes beyond weight loss. It can include things like longevity.
And people turn to it, I think, at first because they like the idea of not having to worry about what they eat, but the more they experience fasting and get involved with the community, they start to see it's even better when you start to optimize your diet. It's not like every other diet though, because finally you're not obsessed over all the rules and you're not hungry all the time like every other diet, and you're not thinking it's a diet you're gonna stop soon. Almost everyone that tries intermittent fasting with grace and ease and curiosity wants to fast for the rest of their life.
As we talked about, there are different kinds of nutritional restriction, and one of the really popular forms of nutritional restriction is the Atkins or the Keto Diet, and that's basically a diet that focuses on protein and fat as your primary sources of energy. Intermittent fasting creates a state called ketosis, which is using your own body's energy to as nutrition. But that's stimulated through a restriction of eating. But when you're off that fasted window, you can eat what you'd like. You can eat carbohydrates or whatever you'd like.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about why fasting really works, it's because we're finally not producing insulin. And because of that, we're finally able to make ketones out of our body fat, which is really what your body fat is there for. And so one way or the other, people either get into the fasting community and find their way to keto, or get into the keto community and find their way to fasting. And it's because they share a lot of the same benefits, but fasting is actually way more flexible and sustainable.
So the scientific community has really begun to categorize nutritional restriction into different buckets. And those three buckets are caloric restriction, macronutrient restriction, and time restriction. And intermittent fasting is really the catch-all phrase for time restriction. But you can also imagine simply limiting your calories every day. You take in less than you consume. That's a way of restricting your diet. And you can also macronutrient restrict, which is you could focus around protein and fats, or you can focus purely around protein or carbs and protein. As you know, throughout the decades, people have tried all different kinds of combinations and permutations.
It's so true. And I think it gets a little confusing at first when you start fasting and people are talking about calories, because how do those two work together? Do you have to restrict calories in order to find success with fasting? Well, I think one way to look at it is when you do a chronic low-calorie diet, like we've been doing for generations, you're usually eating a lot more often. You're snacking in between, and your body's sending you all of these signals to find more food because that's the only energy source it really knows how to tap into. But once you become fat adapted, thanks to intermittent fasting or a reduced carbohydrate diet, which means you're producing less insulin, right? Then finally, your body is making calories from your own body fat, and that's how it meets its metabolic needs. So many people achieve mental clarity and boosted brain flow and neurotransmitters that really help the brain function optimally, or focus at least. We forget sometimes how similar the benefits are for fasting as they are for exercise. And we know exercise does all sorts of things to boost our brain, our mental health, and all sorts of blood flow and those neurotransmitters. And so it's kind of no wonder. And if you think about it on a survival standpoint, like what would have happened in the times of our Paleolithic ancestors, it's like if our brain started to decline because we couldn't find food, how would we possibly catch something? How would our species have survived?
Time restriction seems to be the gateway that most people are comfortable with. And so to ask someone to go for a day without eating seems like a really hard thing to do. And it is a hard thing to do, especially when you've not done it before. But if you can say to someone, take 12 hours and show yourself that you can go without eating, and then go to 13, go to 14, go to 15, go to 16, you start realizing, you start training your body, but you also start realizing that it's not as bad as it seems. A lot of it's a mental barrier, but I think also some of it is transitioning your body to process your energy in a different way. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's like you're training. Like if you've never ran a half marathon before and you scheduled one 6 months away, you gotta work your way up to be able to run that marathon. And so in the meantime, when you start with a 12-hour fast, when you're eating more nutrient-dense foods, it becomes so much easier to go 13 hours, to go 14 hours, to go 16 hours. And if you start head first, 16-8 or 18-6, these are some of the terms that people use for new fasting, methods or routines, you kind of can feel like you lost before you even started. Really, it should be easy if you take it gradually.
This notion of cellular repair, it's the body fixing itself. And that's what we think is underneath this idea of longevity, that perhaps when we stimulate autophagy, we are reversing the things that cause aging. Whenever I have tried to change my habits in the past, I've always benefited from a few things. Having the knowledge around how to do that effectively, and having the proper peer support and the people around me to help me achieve that goal. And one of the really cool things about the modern day internet is that, and your phones, is that you can have that community in your pocket. And so one of the cool things that LifeOmic is working on is this app called LifeExtend, which is really a place where people can go and build healthy habits and do things like track your fasting and talk to people about their fasting habits and compete, even if you're interested in that sort of thing. Yeah. So at least for me, it's been a really nice tool to work with and help develop, because it creates a milieu in which fasting is kind of cool and you feel like you have a lot of peer support.
Yeah, when you're first starting, it might sound weird to your friends and family, so you almost want to keep it to yourself, but then join a fasting community so you feel supported.
Exactly.
I mean, where to start is just, test out the waters, the 12-hour, the 13-hour, the 14-hour mark. Or if you've already been doing all this reading and research about fasting, you've probably got so many ideas. Just choose one and try that one out first. And then use something like the Life Fasting app. And you can join those communities. Literally, they're called circles, and you can talk with other people like you under common interests or things that you're trying to do with your fast. And I remember when I first started fasting, you're like trying to remember which time you started your fast, when you're breaking your fast. But the app has like the timer on it, so you know how much more is left to go to reach your goal. And now they can talk to coaches on the app. So that's something I've been doing with LifeOmic, and it's been really fun. People can just kind of reach out to me if they have fasting questions. They can schedule like a private call, or we even do group sessions so they can hear while I'm working with other people with similar challenges or goals, and we work together towards our fasting goals.
That's pretty cool.